Okay, so welcome back to This Week in Mythic Plus, where we talk about everything that's happened this week in Mythic Plus. And this week is actually kind of interesting because we have the new patch. With the 11.1.5 patch notes, I'm going to be honest, most people were expecting Dinars, Horrific Visions, Corruption, anything of power to be coming out with launch. And I have the unfortunate announcement to say, none of that's happening. So basically how this ends up affecting Mythic Plus is pretty negligible, right? We're not going to have Horrific Visions until May 20th, which at that point, then we are going to gain some amount of power, which ranges from within sim variants to 3% damage gain. I kind of suspect that they're going to have to tune Corruption a little bit more because right now, most of them are undertuned except for Void Ritual, which is heavily overtuned. So that'll probably end up getting changed. But that's not coming out until May 20th. Dinars are still TBD. They could, in theory, scrap Dinars. I suspect that we're going to get an announcement within the next week about what the future of Dinars holds, how you're supposed to acquire them, what you're going to be getting out of them, that kind of thing. But as for like when they drop, we don't really know how that's going to affect the landscape of Mythic Plus. You know, it's yet to be seen. People are going to get slightly better trinkets. People are going to be able to get House of Cards. They're going to be able to get some of the Galley Tech limited edition item. Jaster Diamond, of course, is obviously very OP as well. So those are the kind of the things that are going to be looking to happen on the patch. But in the meantime, you could, level a character faster with 10% experience potion to that stack and get an experience buff. And yeah, there's no other real power attached to the patch. In other news, there's actually been some crazy tech discovered in Priory of the Sacred Flame. So we got Zorthis here. Hold on. Can't block the tomato with the bunny ears. So there's some crazy tech that's in Priory of the Sacred Flame. So in Priory of the Sacred Flame, on Captain Dalecry, that's probably one of the least understood bosses of the patch. So he has an ability that's called Bound by Fate, and most people didn't know that this exists. So what Bound by Fate does is Captain Dalecry and his trusted guard are bound by Holy Light, causing all four to share health while near each other. And that's important, while near each other. Captain Dalecry's presence increases the health of his nearby trusted guards by 1,000%. So that's why whenever you have to fight Imberlins on the boss, the mini boss has so much health, which is why most people didn't think that they shared health. This is realistically a 2-target encounter. Now, what was recently discovered by Zorthis is these mobs have this Bound by Fate buff if they are in very specific points. And Karasis DM'd me some notes about this, and he said, so let's say I kill the first mini boss, the Thunderclap guy, which in this case would be Suleiman. Chainmail runs down to his corpse. So Chainmail would run, and we kill him like where he spawns right now. Chainmail would run all the way down to his corpse. But if it's too far, then you don't get the Bound by Fate buff. And these mobs can, if the mini bosses have the Bound by Fate buff, say we kill Suleiman here, and say we kill, what is this mini boss right here? Ama right here, then we'll get Thander Dual Maul, and we will get Chainmail on these points. And if you get them on these points, I mean, and you can see this in the Zorthis clip right here, like on screen, you see the Thander Dual Maul, or Chainmail actually. Zorthis is hovering over Chainmail's health, and Chainmail is losing HP because she has that Bound by Fate buff on her. Then at some point, you get the 50 count just from the mob dying. And so you see Chainmail's health is continuing to deteriorate, dies, and then they gain 50 count. So it goes from 301 count to 351 count. And then eventually they have Standard Dual Maul also go down. And so they go from 351 count to 401 count, which is an insane skip in Priory of the Sacred Flame. So basically, now, something that you need to know is that the Bound by Fate buff has a range, but the range is actually fairly far. And so where you end up killing off Suleiman and where you're killing off Amiya really matters a lot, right? So where you're ending up spawning Chainmail and Dual Maul, it does really matter. And so I think you can probably get Suleiman killed off like here. You get Chainmail spawned at like the top of the stairs-ish. And then if you end up killing off Amiya and spawning Dual Maul over here, that will guarantee that you can actually get some count. Now, the downside is testing this. It requires you to go into an M0 because the Inspiring Presence is only a mythic level mechanic, so you couldn't test in a follower dungeon or in a normal dungeon. But definitely go play around with it and play around with like where you were summoning these mini bosses to make sure that they're going to continue to get that debuff and they're going to end up dying off for free. That way you can get that 100 count for free. This is going to, in my opinion, give you around a minute and a half. It might be a little bit shorter but I think on a per mini boss average, it should be 45 seconds ish by not having to kill these mobs. And then it gives you 100 count by not having to kill them. It's actually crazy. So that's what's been discovered in Priory of the Sacred Flame. So I suspect that that timer for people who are doing it, basically until Blizzard fixes it, is going to be very generous. I have a suspicion that this is something that is pretty likely to get fixed, because it seems quite unlikely that the mobs are supposed to be benefiting from this Bound by Fate presence where they are losing HP. And then honestly too, the fact that they give count while not being tagged in combat is very weird. More often than not, if mobs die to secondary damage effects while MC'd or something like that, or out of combat, they tend to not give count. And so the fact that these are giving count is actually kind of insane. But yeah, that's one of the biggest things that's happened this week. And honestly, probably the biggest thing that's happened this week is this Priory of the Sacred Flame thing that was uncovered by Zorthus yesterday. So with the 11.1.5 notes being a little bit of a letdown, let's talk about some of the hotfixes that we've seen. So I made a video on this, I think it was Friday, kind of covering what I thought about all these changes. And let's take a second to kind of look at these in retrospect. Almost all of these changes are excellent, and honestly, I think very well targeted by Blizzard. Candle King's Throw Darkness, health absorbed reduced by 20%. This fight went from hard to demonic very quickly. I talked about it last week on This Week in Mythic Plus. We kind of covered how there were undocumented changes to the Candle King that made that fight very difficult. And I think reducing the heal absorb by 20% was just warranted. Hobgoblins no longer spawning brew drops on death. Again, I said this in the video. I still stand by this. I don't think they should spawn brew drops in general, but I would prefer if they didn't spawn brew drops on the charge and spawn them on death. But at the same point, the brew drops are just really annoying. So I'm super happy with this change. I think that very well received. Yes, health being reduced is whatever. Visual clarity stuff, they don't really add these into patch notes all too often. There have been a ton of undocumented VFX updates on things like Kultharok, on things like Hobgoblin charges, on just every ability in the game, the Death Speaker frontals in Theater of Pain. Continuing to add good VFX in this patch has honestly been fantastic. I think that it's been great for the game. The new swirly animations look fantastic, and I think it's one of those things that Blizzard continuing to update their VFX and make things telegraph better for the players just makes it easier to play the game without weak auras and without feeling like you constantly need to have something in your ear being like feet or watch out frontal from like untelegraphed abilities. Because the worst thing that happens in this game sometimes is a bunch of really cringe untelegraphed abilities that hit you and you still just like don't really know how you die, like the grease gun in Motherlode. That's still a thing where it's like a completely invisible cast, and you can, same with the Earth Shock, you can randomly get hit by it, and it's just like this untelegraphed thing, and you're just like, this is so stupid. And continuing to opt into VFX updates, even on old dungeons like Workshop, where they probably don't have to, and they would be well within their right to just be like, yeah, it's fine. But taking the time to go through and update some of the stuff to make it more digestible as a player is great. We'll talk about this last one, this last change at the very end. Priory of the Sacred Flame, I think that these are excellent changes. Ardent Paladin health has been reduced. Prioress Merprey health has been reduced. Lynx, immediately right after the change, people have started taking Lynxes in Priory of the Sacred Flame. I think that this pack, where it's Sharpshooter, Lynx, has started to be taken into Captain Dalecry. I think that that's already something that people are experimenting now with the Lynx, since the HP reduction and the pounce damage reduction. They're trying to figure out, oh, okay, is this doable into a boss? Where can this actually be played into? Are these mobs more valuable now? And I think that that's exactly what Blizzard wanted to do, right? They wanted to make those mobs a little bit more valuable. I think they should be looking at some of these true sight mobs that we have this season. There's a lot of true sight mobs that block corridors, such as things like bubbles, such as things like the Hobgoblin and Cinder Meadery. I don't think they're fixing something like that right now, but I think that they're hopefully in the future can be kind of a philosophical change for how they place true sight mobs, allowing you to, shroud by, or allowing you to invis potion by, because right now we're doing a lot of Nelf skips, and I suspect that the logical conclusion that Blizzard will come to is we don't want them being able to Nelf mobs that have true sight, which they're probably within their right to change. But that's at the same point, it's more like we would rather like invis potion or shroud these, but you're forcing us to like pull back and Nelf them off. So I would love for just fewer true sight mobs in the future as well, to try to give us more options for these mobs that people really just don't think are great count and would love to skip. Alternatively, they could just increase their count and make them feel forced, but then then it's more of an option. Okay, so the final change is the Cujo one, and this one is one that I had a pretty immediate reaction, and I've had a little bit of time to think about a bit more. So Cujo health has been reduced by 10%, and I actually saw a lot of positive feedback about the Cujo health being reduced by 10%, and it makes sense. For a lot of people, this is just a straight 10% nerf to the fight. For those people who weren't doing the box cheese. Now, the second line here is addressed an issue where Cujo can be hit during venting flames at a certain angle. What I'm going to say is I think that this fight just isn't that great. And that's kind of where I land on the fight. I think that they should have increased the cooldown on the venting flames and on the leap on Cujo. There's a lot of instances where it's really difficult to get a full Bloodlust off, or really difficult for melee DPS to get all their offensive CDs off with the current pacing of how this fight works, where it goes leap, 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 and then it goes immediately behind the box. And then you come out, you're able to hit the boss uninterrupted for about 15 to 20 seconds. And then it goes leap, 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 and then it goes back behind the box again. And it just feels really bad to have a lot of your combat time interrupted on this fight, where you're not able to contact the boss for extended periods of time. Even if you are only LOSing for 2.5 seconds, there is that second where you have to position yourself and get behind the box. And so there's still some time that's lost, even though it's not just purely LOS. I don't think the LOS mechanics are great in Mythic Plus just in general. And that's kind of why I land on the side of, I just don't think this is an excellent fight. And I think it could use for increasing the cooldown of the fight. I don't think they're going to be looking to rework it or anything like that in the middle of the season, nor do I think that they should necessarily waste a bunch of time trying to rework it. But if they do increase the cooldown by, I don't know, 50% or something like that, they make it happen. I won't say half as often, but 75% as often. Or yeah, 75% as often. That would actually be more effective too, just to make it a little bit better of a fight. I do understand the health is trying to counteract the people, like how much damage you were able to do while LOSing behind the box. But again, ultimately, I think the feedback that should be looked at and listened to whenever you're looking at this is just like, this fight just isn't super fun, and being forced to LOS just isn't that great. I do think it makes sense that Blizzard's looking to fix jank though, and having to have this knowledge of, oh, I need to backpedal into this certain pixel to be able to get Cujo into the box at this certain angle. That way my melee DPS and my range can attack, and then your range and your melee need to know that if you shimmy across the side of the box at a very specific angle on the long side of the box relative to where the boss is, then you can sometimes get angles on the boss where you can continue to DPS through it. That kind of jank and that kind of knowledge that you need to have is really weird. And so I understand why Blizzard fixed it. At the same point, I would be looking to try to make this a more enjoyable fight in the process as well, as opposed to just being like, yep, you can no longer hit the boss during venting flames. So for other things, we got MDI Time Trials. So MDI Time Trials have concluded. And for those who don't know, the MDI as you knew it, where it was a speedrun competition, is gone. It has been replaced with the TGP. The TGP format now is the renamed MDI, and so that kind of has taken over, and it's been renamed. The TGP has basically been renamed the MDI, and the MDI, the old format, is gone. So what have we seen? So we've seen Darkflame Cleft and Priory the Sacred Flame. I suspect that some teams were actually doing this stuff that we just saw with the mini bosses in the Priory and Time Trials. Just looking at their timers, how this Wunderbar team, which is the former Echo guys plus Whippy, had a time of 2 minutes and 45 seconds under the timer. I suspect that they had to do that kind of strategy with the first boss to be able to achieve that thing. Same with these other timers that are like 2 minutes under. I don't know if the mandatory one was with it, considering that they were so close to the timer. I think it's possible either way. But these ones that are 2 minutes and 2:45 under, I think it's fairly likely that they were doing the Inspiring Presence thing. But in other news, as for what's been shown compositionally, a lot of Vengeance Demon Hunter. Vengeance Demon Hunter was ran pretty uniformly. There have been multiple flavors of Mage. We've seen both Arcane and Fire so far. So we saw Fire in Priory of the Sacred Flame. We saw Arcane and Darkflame Cleft. Arcane is going to tend to be the more popular selection just for Mage across the board. And that tends to be because the priority damage that Arcane is bringing, or the funnel damage, not even priority damage, but the funnel damage that Arcane is bringing surrounding Arcane Orbs is pretty unmatched. Even if they do slightly less overall, that kind of fits in well with most of the specs that are really good on the season, with specializations like Balanced Druid, with specializations like Unholy Decay, Ellie Shaman, Ret Paladin, whatever. those specs do really big AoE. Dev Evoker, those specs do really big AoE, and what the Arcane Mage provides is it provides good single target, and it provides really, really good funnel, valuable funnel. The best spec in the game at you mark a skull target, and the Arcane Mage actually guarantees that it'll die probably before the rest of the trash, but maybe at the exact same time as the trash, but it probably will be before the pack dies. Like the muscle in the first pull, Cinder Meadery, the hobgoblins in Cinder Meadery, the harvesters in Cinder Meadery, the boss with the beelets on it in Cinder Meadery, IPA. You get the point. So Mage, very popular. We're also been seeing a lot of Unholy DK and Balanced Druid. We did see some of the Balanced Druids get dropped. So there was a Demonology Warlock that was played. I think there was a Dev Evoker that was played as well. But in general, they've been playing Moonkin. Moonkin is very popular and powerful. In the season, they bring Mark of the Wild, which is an excellent, probably the best Mythic Plus raid buff. The only other buff that's even close is probably the Shaman buff, offensively at least. The Shaman buff in compositions that have melee DPS, the Wind Fury element of it, that's a huge damage game. But for generalized compositions, the Mark of the Wild, of course, being 3% damage, 1.5% versatility, especially whenever you're trying to min-max the comp, that Mark of the Wild is excellent. And the Moonkin damage, even on its own, as you can see right here, people are willing to play double Druid because the Balanced Druid standalone damage is solid. And so let's talk about what we've seen from the healers so far. So in the top 20 runs of Dark Flame Cleft, we have seen 1, 2, 3, 4 different healer specializations. Now, Ortimus is the only person who's playing Mistweaver Monk, and he's going to be playing Mistweaver Monk in 8 out of 8 dungeons because the vegans, they run this is their comp, right? They play Bear Druid, Mistweaver Monk, Hunter, Fury Warrior, and Assassination Rogue. They got the 9 seed, and I think that there's a chance that they could reasonably play Spoiler in the TGP. I think they're very good, and I think that the format, assuming that they're able to be consistent, could actually benefit them compared to some of the other competitors. Now, why would people actually go ahead and play Resto Druid, Disc Priest, and Restoration Shaman all at a top level in these 21s in Dark Flame Cleft? And the reason is the Candle King. The HPS check on the Candle King, we talked about last week whenever we talked about undocumented hotfix changes. The HPS check on the Candle King is very steep. Obviously, we did see it earlier today, get nerfed by 20%, but the HPS check is still quite challenging. It's not something that's a pushover, just in general. And with that HPS check being as difficult as it is, the Resto Druid's fairly comfy, the Restoration Shaman's fairly comfy. There's also this situation on this fight, whenever you're playing with a Discipline Priest, if they get targeted with the pickaxe over and over again, they can run into a spot where if they have to move too much, they can actually be in trouble. Now, I suspect these teams are going to be using the terrain of the wall to be able to optimize their movement to where their Disc Priest doesn't have to run around too much. They don't have to break a bunch of statues with the circles. But the fight is very difficult, can get very difficult for Priest, especially if they have to run a bunch or they're missing globals or whatever. Whereas the Restoration Druid, of course, they have a lot of instant cast globals where they can just like hot people up. People can stand inside the F-flow, so they'll have some passive healing if they're not always casting at the exact same time. But Resto Druid's probably the most comfy healer on this fight. And the Restoration Shaman, if they get in trouble, they can always just like Spirit Walker's Grace. Now, there are things that the Disc Priest provides that the other healers don't, particularly Fortitude, Lenience, that kind of thing. You know, massive shields, especially make Blazicon fairly comfy. But so there's some kind of give and take. And it makes me kind of wonder if Dark Flame Cleft and Operation Floodgate are going to be non-Disc Priest dungeons, and every other dungeon is going to be a Disc Priest dungeon. It's going to be kind of interesting because there are serious give and take whenever you're looking at the other healers. Particularly, you know, this Restoration Shaman team, this should probably be the top DPS composition, I think, damage-wise, because you're getting this Shaman buff into your group, whereas this brings PI, which is fine. But the Shaman buff is inarguably a slightly higher DPS build out of the healer profile here. But it's kind of interesting to just see like what the most valuable thing is out of the healer and how that's going to evolve over the course of the TGP. All right, and that's going to do it for this week in Mythic Plus. We had a bunch of stuff from various dungeon hotfixes to new tech and Priory of the Sacred Flame to MDI Time Trials concluding. I hope to see you guys in the next video. I've been streaming every single day. I'm doing a Shaman 0 to Hero challenge. That challenge is probably going to be concluding in the next, I would assume, 2 to 3 streams, but we're going to wait and see. And I hope to see you guys in the next video, and I will see you guys next week. Goodbye.